Many people have speculated on the connection between autism and astrology. Some youth service workers have even noticed a predominant amount of earth signs in their natal charts of the autistic youth they care for. But regardless of what you want to call these particular traits, or whether or not you consider them autistic or not, these are the ASD traits and their consequences that definitely exist in the earth element, or the melancholic analyst personality type in psychology. And some of these traits also exist in the phlegmatic as well as water signs. So here are some earth element imbalanced or negative characteristics. Underneath these primary traits are consequences or examples of the primary characteristic. There's being materialistic. So when you're very materialistic, you can spend a lot of time with material things, of course, and with your possessions. Much of your time. And the more time you spend on your things, the less time you invest in people and your social life. You could be less socially motivated for this reason. You could have an inclination to just stay at home and be interested more so in the interior life. But being materialistic motivates you to stay with your things, your hobbies, your crafts, your possessions, your toys, in the case of children. So you prefer to spend time with your hobbies and things like that, and your musical instruments or your tools, electronics, your computer, laboratory equipment, if you're into science, and some ASD traits they list, likes to garden, that's the common one. So maybe it's gardening, but basically there's a lot of craftiness going on with this. The next trait is attention to detail. This is a major significant common trait. There are many imbalances and problems too that arise from too much attention to detail. So these are perfectionism, which leads to other problems like being overly critical, insecure, easily and overly defensive and proud, exaggerated perception, taking things too seriously because of a lack of seeing objects or situations or people in perspective with other things. So that right there, the perfectionism and detail, or rather the attention to detail by itself is almost like 70% of the problem, and what causes so many confusions. So as I mentioned, this overly critical, that's a trait on its own that I'm listing here. This leads to pessimism, focusing only on negative qualities or situations. And because of attention to detail, not always seeing the bigger picture or the other side of the story. So without recognizing the positive things, the positive situations, right? These are flaw spotters. So this leads to vindictiveness in relationships. Only seeing the negative and not recognizing the positive. This is a huge problem with, autistic people in relationships. When you're a critical, detail-oriented person, your mind is basically designed to spot problems and flaws everywhere. It's very easy to lose sight of the good things, or to lose awareness of the other circumstances, the other factors, the other events going on, or past events. And we do this all the time. It's a major form of delusion to not stay positive, or to not see the whole story or the other person's side of the story, or to not recognize the good things, like, for example, to not take a nice, sincere tone from someone, or rather, as nice and kind, but to take that nice, sincere tone and think that it's insincere or negative, twisting things to be negative when they're not, right? Not trusting people, as if you think that as if you're paranoid, you think that they're scheming something against you, even though they're saying hi or smiling and being nice. You still don't believe it because of you're overly critical. And so you think that they don't really mean what they're saying, or they're looking down on you, even though their tone is sincere. You don't remember the times they actually did say sorry to you in the relationship, or the times they tried to be nice to you. Another consequence of attention to detail is that you exaggerate what you see, right? So this exaggerated perception, it's possible to over-distinguish, to see differences in something that that don't really exist. When you have too much attention to detail, you can see very subtle distinctions to the point where sometimes they're imperceptible. You're seeing things that aren't even there. And this can lead to things like, getting misperceiving size, exaggerating size, or even exaggerating, somebody's tone of voice. When someone has a slightly cold tone of voice, that can be interpreted as, extremely cold and bitter, dark, angry, so everything can be amplified because of attention to detail. But it can also lead to enchanting too, where you develop an abnormal fascination with something or someone that others don't find as interesting or impressive, just because of some very subtle minor detail. Now, attention to detail also creates overthinking and overanalyzing, of course. Overanalyzing creates worrying, and that leads to catastrophizing or worrying about worst case scenarios that are very unlikely to happen. And you notice people who are critical and worrying about worst case scenarios will endlessly ramble to you about things. If you did something kind of wrong, you made a minor mistake around them, these are the people that will ramble on and on, giving you a big lecture about why you're not supposed to do that thing and all the different things that could happen that you know already, so it's redundant. It's that person on their dating profile who has this enormous page or more about themselves or what they think about the world or their worldview, and it's quite serious, it's rambling on and on. Or it's that person who writes a whole page worth responding to your Reddit question, rambling with insignificant details and side stories, and this is so much detail, so a lot of the time they actually miss the point of what they're saying or what they're trying to answer you with. So consequently, these people have, however, with this observance, they have exceptional long-term memory, often of very particular things, a particular thing you said to them years ago, or a specific phrase that they heard in a show or a movie. And what if you prefer to spend time alone? Well, consequently, there's a lack of practice socializing, and anybody who doesn't practice their social skills will develop a difficulty speaking up. Now, I believe that the modes of melancholic and phlegmatic are going to be, they're just quiet anyway, and it might be hard for them to speak up even without training or with less training. But especially if you're somebody who just naturally doesn't like to socialize and you like to stay at home a lot, you don't have practice, as much practice actually speaking than other people. So it's not a surprise that your brain struggles to make the motor connection to speak up when you're a kid. That part is probably developing slower. It takes longer to speak up like maybe the average person per se. So it's hard to speak up for non-verbal or non-speaking autists. Of course, especially when you're young, you're very young, your brain is still developing, before teenagehood and throughout teenagehood, all the way up until around, 21, 22, which is when I could finally begin to speak up, just scratching the surface of being able to communicate thoroughly, speaking my mind and saying everything that I want to say when I want to say it. So it's very hard to speak up without enough practice. And same with emotion too. It can be very hard expressing emotion, especially for melancholic types, because you don't do it with words usually. They don't have the habit of using their words to express emotion. They do it physically in other ways, with gestures or facial expressions. Right? This is the case of non-speaking autists. Of course, with less social experience, this makes you socially awkward. So earth signs, in particular, are practical, and their mind is designed to be organized and analytical, so that they can construct things and taxonomize things, categorize, and create things with structure. So think about how this affects your mind with socializing or speaking, and if you might have a pattern of speaking that is rigid, right? Where it sounds like you're chopping vegetables when you speak, where you have this fascination to get the words right, the pronunciation perfect, and you struggle to choose between synonyms because you're a perfectionist, or because you want to speak in a very organized way. So your speaking habits are going to be different. You might be very rigid in your routine. You could have a very monotonous lifestyle. You're very used to carrying out all your tasks for the day in some kind of system that you've established for yourself. So as soon as you establish that, you don't even have to think about it, and then you stop thinking about it and you just do it automatically. You might have very precise speech habits, as I said, clinging to things like pronunciation, synonyms, spelling, and grammar. It might be difficult to decide on the perfect phrasing, the arrangement of words, which synonyms to choose, and consequently, you might be slower to speak because of that. Furthermore, how can a mind that's designed to be practical and organized and structured not come with some negative quirks like OCD? OCD habits like labeling and categorizing and classifying things as your means of understanding the world. I think it's no surprise that if your mind is designed to organize and construct things, you can't help but be OCD. You can't help but notice the ratios and size of things and buildings, to count the windows, or to see or to try to classify the different types of buildings in a city and the different kinds of haircuts and things like that. It's everything. You have this strong urge to really understand where something fits in a category. And with this byproduct of rigidity, it's difficult to think outside the box. Earth signs are known to be narrow-minded. They have a restricted way of thinking, and this allows them to follow the rules properly and to do things in a step-by-step way. But this structured way of thinking can be restricting sometimes. So they're very good at following systems, but then they stop thinking about it because it becomes automatic and repetitive. And then it's hard to think outside the box. They stop questioning really, how to do something, or what really is the point of something. What's the purpose of a certain action or a process? They stop questioning because a lot of their habits are automatic. So oftentimes, they're not sprouting with ideas the way air signs are, or the way that sanguine temperaments are, constantly questioning things and just coming up with ideas all the time, constantly thinking or talking about what they're thinking. So especially when the melancholic types are young, they tend to follow rules and norms without stopping to consider just why these rules exist in the first place. Why are they doing things in this methodical, specific way? And really, they truly don't, the melancholics or the earth signs, they truly don't think very much in that regard. But what if we change one word in the title of this Earth element characteristic chart here and we added the word autism? All of a sudden, just like many autism traits charts, this one shares most of the same traits. Whether you want to call it autism or not, if you know anything about astrology, the Earth element has these imbalances, and same with the melancholic temperament. They're strangely similar to autistic traits. Now, that's not to say that Earth is the only element that has the potential to be autistic, but I personally think that the feminine elements of Earth and water share the most similar traits with autism, and they're more likely to have these traits. My personal opinion is that really, when it comes to mild autism, basically everyone has it, because it's just a byproduct of these modes of psyche. So I'll conclude with the confirmation I received in meditation a couple nights ago. I wasn't thinking about autism at the time, but in resonance to the talks I was working on about astrological personality, I was given this very long public lecture in this dream where the speaker described this emotionally arduous journey of self-discovery between these 3 Earth sign kids. I don't remember the details, like all the obstacles they had to overcome, but it was this narrative style lecture that used this very touching and heartfelt story to explain the challenges that autistic youth go through. And it felt like a pretty long insight. It must have been what felt like at least half an hour or so in the astral plane. Half an hour or so of listening before it concluded and I woke up. So that's my own spiritual proof that autism does in fact originate from or is simply a byproduct of having a lot of Earth energy in your psyche. Because I've been practicing insight meditation for 8 years now, and these kinds of visions are always true because the premonitions and phenomena always match the circumstances of the physical world. So it's just a matter of waiting for science to catch up to the ancient wisdom when scientists will be able to trust meditation again and turn to it as a reliable means of research and investigation.